Thank you for staying here on your most credible news source. We cut in regular transmission to take you to the Aqua Safari Hotel, where there is a high-level dialogue on the post-election issues. We'll take you there now.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. I think after our introductions, we have
apologies for the loss in sound there, but what you're seeing in your shots are visuals from the Aqua Safari Hotel. What is happening there is a high-level post-election dialogue. You know, the election 2020 was riddled with a lot of issues. Even post-election, we've got reports from the EU. We've had the minority in Parliament, for example, mention the omission of violence during the election when the president addressed them a couple of months ago. So there are a lot of unresolved issues as regards the 2020 elections, and we expect that at this high-level stakeholders workshop, all the issues will be discussed. Head of our political desk, Evans Mensah, is there. He'll be briefing us on everything that happens there. We do expect that there will be reps from the EC and the various parties, and hopefully parties that have grievances may be able to settle them at this particular workshop. While we wait for the sound to come, would also let you know that this is your most credible news source, the JoyNews channel. We'll take you back to the Aqua Safari Hotel.
Strong democratic principles undeniably help to build Ghana's credibility as a beacon of democracy in the South region. We are also pleased with the impressive collaborative partnership that the United States government enjoys with the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana, the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers, CODEO, the National Peace Council, and other public and civil society organizations striving hard to ensure electoral peace. These organizations also help to contribute to the Peace Pact signed on December 4th by the presidential candidates of the two main political parties. This was an excellent effort to ensure that the electoral process was not marred by political violence and that electoral disputants resorted to the judicial process to seek redress. CDD Ghana and CODEO's outstanding election observation work has been recognized as demonstrating neutrality, impartiality, and integrity. We observed CODEO's operational base for the parallel vote tabulation, as well as reviewed the repository of reports from CODEO election observers who were deployed across the country during the elections. We're pleased with what we saw. CODEO's parallel vote tabulation was also an exceptional resource that helped the Electoral Commission to ensure a free and fair election. As we know, Ghana has made considerable strides towards establishing democratic governance by preserving the rule of law, safeguarding it with a free press, and promoting the delivery of essential services to all its citizens irrespective of status, beliefs, or circumstance. For Ghana to continue to stay on this trajectory, fair and credible elections are a necessity. This requires that all stakeholders are fully invested in learning and adapting to improve future elections. Today's review, following the recent election petition, should motivate us to critically evaluate what work took place prior to, during, and after the 2020 elections, and determine how best to sustain and promote Ghana's democracy. I am certain that many of us would eagerly await the outcomes of this workshop with a keen interest in Ghana's political development. Recommendations for improvements and reforms would most definitely engage the interest of all stakeholders and undoubtedly generate further public conversation. Again, we want to thank you for inviting us to participate, and we look forward for a fruitful and engaging. Recommendations for improvements and reforms would most definitely engage the interest of all stakeholders and undoubtedly generate further public conversation. Again, we want to thank you for inviting us to participate, and we look forward for a fruitful and engaging deliberation. Thank you very much.
Much, Emmanuel. Let me also recognize Mr. Evans Nimako and Mr. McMenu from the MPP who also just joined us. Before I invite our distinguished keynote speaker to make his keynote, unfortunately, in 2020, we lost two of our very active CODEO board members, Mr. John Larvey, who for many years was the PRO at the Electoral Commission, and then later on the National Court Data for CODEO, and then Mr. Nicholas Atre, who trained many of our observers throughout the years. We lost both of them. So with all humility, I would ask that we stand for a 1-minute silence in commemoration of. Thank you. Our keynote speaker does not need a long introduction. Very much a son of Ghana, and I think we've all admired him and all the work that he has done. A diplomat, an academic, a politician, a lawyer, an African. He was the UN Special Representative to West Africa and head of UNOWAS, and until his engagement at the international level, he was a member of Ghana's parliament, and he served various positions. And I think anybody that has been involved in elections in Ghana, you know that you will always meet Dr. Chambers wherever you go, whether on the field or in meetings, because he cares about Ghana's democracy continuing to be a beacon for the rest of West Africa. So we are really humbled that he agreed today to give the keynote. Dr. Chambers, you are welcome.
CODEO. I will also stand on the protocol already established by the acting chair of CODEO, Sheikh Ami Yao, but allow me to recognize Her Lordship, member of the Supreme Court of Ghana, here with us, the Executive Secretary of the President, civil societies of the international organizations, and of course the EU is well represented here, so is the USAID. I actually returned home last week at the end of my mandate at UNOWAS, and for the first time in more than 20 years, I was really looking forward to a quiet Ramadan, as I was telling Sheikh, Ramadan without any travels, and then I got a call. And there are certain calls when you get them, and there are certain demands that I made, you cannot say no. And for me, when Professor Jimebedu called and told me about this retreat, and given my own little involvement on behalf of the UN in the recent elections here in Ghana, and our own attachment to this democratic project in Ghana, it was difficult to say no, to stay away. And I'm really very happy to have come. It's given me the opportunity to see many, many good friends, brothers and sisters, some of whom I haven't had the opportunity and the pleasure of meeting in a while. So I'm very pleased to be able to come and spend the next few days here for us to collectively reflect on the path that we tread during the preparations leading up to end during the elections and the post-election period 2020, and to see how we might attempt to improve upon that performance. And let me start off by saying that this conversation is keenly important at a time when there are question marks on the state of democracy in Africa. Those of you who read the Mo Ibrahim report, the recent one that was released for 2020, in fact, it's entitled The Retreat of Democracy in Africa. So that should be worrying to all of us who have an attachment to ensuring democratic consolidation of democratic governance, that the role of our people remains central in determining what system of governance that they have, that there's accountability on our continent, that our institutions function in a way that benefit the African peoples, that there is more and more opening up of political space and freedoms and liberties, and that ultimately we are also seeing progress, economic and social progress in the lives of people, democratic dividend on our continent. I think it's a moment to probably just take a pause and say, wait a minute, is democracy on the retreat? And if it is, what is it that is causing the slippage in a process that we all are keen to advance? So let me commend CODEO, therefore, for organizing this important event and for the invitation to me. And I want to emphasize the importance of after-action reviews to key processes such as elections, with a view to identifying best practices and improving on future electoral processes. Any human endeavor certainly will have its shortcomings, so it's normal. It doesn't matter how well one thinks that one has performed. Monitoring evaluation requires that we take a look at our performance and see how we can improve on future endeavors, future exercises, future elections. In that regard also, let me recognize the invaluable role of civil society organizations, particularly the CODEO, in the democratic process in Ghana. Through the promotion of peaceful, transparent, and credible elections, or even just contributing to conflict prevention and resolution processes. And I want to urge that this continues to be the case. And in fact, many of the examples that we have established here in Ghana have been replicated in neighboring countries. And I can tell you that from my previous work, whether it was with the ECOWAS or with the UN, but in many countries that we go, we're told that, oh, this we learned from Ghana. So that leadership position that we have in this regard is important. Ghanaian civil society ought to be proud of itself and continue to remain engaged and do the work that you need to do to advance the democratic process here and by implication in our sub-region and on our continent. Over the years, and particularly during the 7th December 2020 elections, the contribution of CODEO in collaboration with other partners was instrumental to the conduct and conclusion of the process. Through the deployment of elections observers and regular analysis and advocacy, CODEO once again demonstrated its central role in promoting democratic governance, peace, and stability in the country. And I should underscore that the information generated by CODEO, including from its well-equipped and professionally manned situation room, was very useful to some of us who were playing good officers' role at the time and who came, and in our interactions we were able to get very useful information indeed. And this will be true of other bilateral and multilateral partners of Ghana who were involved in that process. The 7th December general election was another major test to Ghana's democratic process. And Ghanaians, despite numerous challenges in a very tense atmosphere, once again demonstrated their political maturity and love for country by ensuring a largely peaceful conclusion to the process and avoiding a post-electoral crisis. I should add here that indeed in some of our neighboring countries, we did witness crisis prior to the election, during the election, and post-election, including, for instance, in Guinea and neighboring Cote d'Ivoire, where we had an exceptionally large number of election-related violence, particularly in Guinea and in Cote d'Ivoire. And it is in that regard that we should also be concerned that perhaps in that regard we lost one of our bragging rights. I personally used to always say, when I'm talking in other contexts where things are tense, and say, well, look, I come from a country where when we have elections, yes, we have our differences, and you'll have the tension associated with elections everywhere, but there are never any deaths as a result of these elections. And if they occur, they are accidents that happen from accidents of vehicles or motorcycles, people going to or from party events. But I think this time our image has been tainted in that regard, and it should be of concern to us. One person's life is one person too many to be lost in an election. And that reminds me of former President Goodluck Jonathan of Nigeria, who I think today can be proud for all the criticisms that he may have had while he was in office. That one statement that he made, that a single drop of any Nigerian is not worth his ambition to be president. I think this is something that should inspire all of us in Ghana to ensure that never again will we see any loss of life from elections. And so let's go back to the good practice in the past, where whatever shortcomings there may be with the process, the one thing that would not happen would be any killings around the electoral process. And while the findings and recommendations of electoral observation missions have been well documented, and I think even in his opening remarks, the acting chair has highlighted some of it, and our friend from the EU has just told us about their observations contained in their book, which I'm told is on sale even here. So, I mean, and the debate is already live. Let me just make one or two of my own general observations here. Building trust in national institutions to implement their constitutional mandate is essential for the consolidation of democracy, peace, and stability. The role played by national institutions in Ghana during the electoral process has been recognized by many. All actors, including civil society organizations, must continue to work closely with these constitutional bodies and statutory bodies, the Electoral Commission, the National Peace Council, National Commission for Civic Education, police and judiciary, the Media Commission. We have an architecture of institutions which have served us well, and which, if they continue their consultative nature and are open to discussions and consultations with civil society and a broad spectrum of Ghanaian public opinion, can only improve in their performance. So I think going forward, it's necessary that this consultative approach is consolidated and that we all endeavor to work to strengthen these state constitutional institutions that we have established, specifically to improve our conduct of our elections, but in general also to deepen our democratic process. Internal conflict prevention and dispute resolution mechanisms remain reliable and effective. Indeed, one can say that we do have a fairly robust peace architecture in Ghana. And this again was demonstrated during the last elections. I cannot overemphasize the role of the National Peace Council, which UNOWAS and ECOWAS in particular collaborated with a number of platforms, and not only here in Accra, but also in some of the regions. Then, of course, we have the role of CODEO itself, of the IDG, for instance, which worked with the Peace Council, traditional and religious leaders, to host the signing ceremony, where we were able to bring the two leading candidates to an event at Movenpick, which contributed in no small way to calming down the atmosphere and lessening tensions, and to demonstrate a strong commitment on the part of the two leading candidates to also contribute their quota towards peaceful elections. And this is something, it's an asset we should cherish. This peace architecture that we have and the ability to pull on our elders and traditional leaders, religious leaders, active civil society organizations to address these questions. And of course, we have representatives from all of these bodies, and we can hear more from them. What I liked especially was the decentralized institutions, particularly the MPs, the National Peace Council, and the civic education at constituency levels, at district levels, also taking the messages there to talk to grassroots and to appeal to all the stakeholders to be mindful of their conduct in order that we could end up with peaceful and credible elections. Once again, women and youth groups, as well as community-based organizations, demonstrated that they remain key actors to a peaceful electoral process. Through different initiatives, communities were mobilized to promote peaceful elections, and we must endeavor to give them a central role in our electoral process going forward. I mean, we know the youthful profile of our population, the active role of our women, Ghanaian women, particularly when it comes to electoral campaigns. Of course, role of our women, which is not always reflected post-elections in the distribution of the goodies. And I see that in Parliament we don't seem to be improving on that, and the representation is still hovering around 16%. I know that in the past it had gone up to 20%, so it's not a happy story today to say that the gender representation is hovering around 16%. We can do more. The executive is striving, and I've seen a figure of average of 20%, but I think Ghana, with the leadership role that we have in the issues of governance on our continent, we should be among the trendsetters when it comes to this. So I think it's long overdue that at executive level also we should be talking of minimum 30% representation by our female population, which represents more than 50% of the national population. So at 20%, that is an underrepresentation, and I think going forward we should all endeavor to do better there. The commitment to democratic values remains strong in the country. The fact that electoral disputes were settled with the utmost respect for the rule of law is indicative of the high level of political maturity and understanding of the tenets of democracy. This is definitely a lesson to other countries in the region and even beyond, especially with regards to increasing concerns over the decline of democracy in many countries on our continent. And I think that is just one of the attributes of the Ghanaian political elite that must be commended, that we allow the process to run its course, including, of course, the judicial process, which our Constitution has charged with certain responsibilities and given it its clear role. And at the end of the day, even if we do not agree with the reasoning, which is to be expected, which is natural, we accept, because that's the mandate given our judiciary by the Constitution. So I think in that regard, we need to commend our political elite, and indeed civil society has played an important role also in deepening this culture of rule of law. It is not perfect, and there are many areas in which it can be improved. In that regard, let me point out that if you go back to the Mo Ibrahim report that I mentioned, it actually rates Ghana lower at this point than before. So in the category of justice and rule of law, we should be aware that our standing has declined. Given the parameters that the Mo Ibrahim Foundation uses to rate African countries, I think we ought to be conscious of that and maybe interrogate what it is that is causing this decline, because we should be a leader in that category. The other category where we also see a decline is security and rule of law. So I think in these two areas, perhaps when we come to the focused discussions, we can go into more detail there. Then partnerships underpinned by mutual respect remains key in the electoral process. Collaboration between actors at the national level and regional and international actors is always key to the conduct of electoral processes. During the 7 December elections, the collaboration between national stakeholders and institutions such as ECOWAS, the African Union, the UN, the EU, and the diplomatic community was exemplary and must be appreciated. Such partnerships are key to peaceful, credible, transparent, and inclusive elections. And here I can give you an anecdote where during one of my visits, we met with the partners and we were discussing about support by partners to civil society. And when I heard that the figure of persons to be deployed across the country was around 2,000, I immediately struck me that that was a much reduced number than previous years. So I threw a challenge to the partners and I said, wait a minute, we can do better. I know that in previous years it's been much higher. And yes, perhaps we can say that in Ghana, things are generally improving in terms of conduct of this process, so probably you don't need as many as in the past, but still, I just thought that 2,000 was not good enough and that more could be done. And I was glad after that meeting for one of the partners to tell me that indeed they had decided to support CODEO to increase the numbers. So this kind of constructive and positive partnership is very healthy. I know Ghanaians were very sensitive and we want to be sure that we are left alone to do our thing and we feel that we have the capacity to deliver. And so sometimes we might see certain actions as being a bit too intrusive. But that notwithstanding, we are also very open and friendly with our partners, and I think where there's a mutual respect and understanding about each other's role, things can go properly, and we hope that this partnership, we're a member of ECOWAS, we're a member of AU, of UN, so they have their roles to play. But we have good partnership with EU, USAID, and so many other bilateral partners who we hope going forward will continue to support our electoral processes. A concerted approach will be required to enhance the electoral process in Ghana, with such an event being, such as this retreat that we are having, being a first step. Let me urge the EC, Electoral Commission, and other relevant national institutions to put in place a mechanism for consultation to discuss the findings of the recommendations of this retreat that we're having here today, and to develop a strategy for their implementation. All of this will come to nothing if there is not also the goodwill and the good faith to take the good recommendations that will come out of here and perhaps similar such consultations ongoing, and to make good faith effort to implement them. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be with you, and I wish us all fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chambers. We're already behind time, so we'll move straight to session 1, which is going to be chaired by Reverend Dr. Fred Degbe, who is the CODEO Advisory Board Chair. And this is looking at the conduct of the 2020 presidential and parliamentary elections, critical reflections. This is basically to just set the tone, since we'll be having more deeper conversations and looking at various aspects of the electoral process later during the day and the coming days. So let me invite, okay, Dr. Degwe is already here. And then I would invite Mr. Michael Buedi, who is the Director of Research for the Electoral Commission. And I think I'll invite myself to join them. But do you, okay. So it's Michael Buedi, Director of Training for the EC representing the Electoral Commission. Are you ready to? Okay, sure, please. So you can start.
Oh, 10 minutes. Right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good. As some of the existing protocols, let's say that all protocol duly observed. I really don't have much time, but I bring you greetings from the chairperson of the Electoral Commission and the management of the commission. The 2020 presidential parliamentary elections was an eventful, successful, fair and transparent and peaceful election. It's important to note that these activities occurred during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is worth mentioning that based on a technical audit undertaken by an independent biometric consultant, it became necessary to prepare a brand new biometric tool set for due to the following reasons. It was to enhance the system that will include the use of facial recognition to reduce the use of manual verification at the polling stations. Secondly, to replace the existing VSAT wide area network by 4G LLOS links from mobile operators. And thirdly, to build a new data center and disaster recovery center to replace the previous one, which was commissioned in 2012. It is important, however, to note that the entire procurement process was done through an open competitive tendering process, which saw a drastic reduction in the prices of equipment used for the elections. Mr. Chairman, permit me to highlight a few examples. In 2012, the price of the BVD kit was $5,250, and that of the price of the BVR kit was $5,250, and that of the BVD was $917. Today, we are buying a robust, more user-friendly, efficient BVR that captures both fingerprint and facial recognition features at $3,423, and the BVD at $346, thereby ensuring the integrity of the registered. The new equipment is robust because we did not experience the usual breakdown of equipment as we did in 2012 and subsequent years. At 98% of the registration centers monitored by our EC officials, the equipment functioned effectively. And in cases where there were occasional breakdowns, the Commission had a well thought out strategy of replacing the case instead of repairing them as it was the case in the past. Mr. Chairman, let me focus on the registration. First activities before an election can occur is the registration of voters. However, due to the pandemic, the Commission's program delayed substantially to the 1st of July. The registration was undertaken in a COVID environment with a lot of uncertainties, fear, and anxiety. It is important to emphasize, ladies and gentlemen, that the 2020 registration was to entirely replace and compile a brand new voters register In spite of the challenges and the late start, the Commission was successfully able to register more than 17 million people in 38 days. And today, we can all be proud of a register that embodies eligible Ghanaians and Ghanaians only. It is also important to emphasize that in 2012, where there was no COVID, we used 44 days to register 14 million citizens. It's essential to remember that it was highly predicted that the participation for the 2020 voter registration exercise would be very low. But thankfully, we were able to prove our critics wrong. Being able to register 70 million plus people was a major achievement. Again, the registration equipment functioned effectively with minimum breakdowns, that ensuring a smooth registration exercise, unlike the previous years where there were frequent breakdown of equipment hindering the smooth progress of the registration. Another important innovation introduced was making the Form 1A and the guarantors form available online. The result was that many persons completed their forms before they went to the registration center, thereby aiding the swiftness and the smoothness of the process. We also introduced a unique management system which saw the enforcement of law and order at most of the registration centers throughout the country. There were no spread of COVID-19 pandemic as a result of the stringent protocols put in place by the EC. Most of us here were part of the process, so we knew the protocols we went through on the election day and during the registration. And the COVID-19 updates by the Ghana Health Service at the end of the voter registration exercise recorded 0 new cases. This attested to the stringent protocols put in place by the Commission and thus proving again our critics wrong. Right from day one of the registration exercise, the Commission was amazed at the high numbers recorded. For instance, for day one, over 320,000 persons were registered. The high attendance and participation was a major achievement because it happened against the background of fear around COVID and the negative propaganda regarding the registration exercise. To ensure inclusivity, special arrangement was made for the first time for persons with disability, lactating mothers, the aged. We started from age 60 above, later if we reduce it to 50 and above, to register at the EC's offices in comforts. Again, for the first time, in a bid not to disenfranchise students housed in schools studying for their exams, arrangements were made for registration in over 700 senior high schools. Eligible prison inmates were also registered at 8 locations across the country. Today, we can talk of a voters register that contains eligible Ghanaians. Ghana today stands tall for having a register that captures both fingerprints and facial recognition features of voters. Ghanaians can equally boast of running and owning a biometric voter management system for our elections without foreign control. Mr. Chairman, permit me to focus on the exhibition. In our effort to ensure that no registered voter was left behind and to improve and further enhance the integrity of the voters register, the EC embarked on a 10-day physical or in-person voter registration exercise. The exercise was highly successful in that it sought to cure all the gaps in the data and ensure no registered voter was left out. The turnout for the exhibition exercise was 46.7%, recorded over a period of 10 days, as opposed to 45 over the period of 21 days, 2026. It is important to emphasize again that the exhibition was done in the COVID-19 environment with a lot of uncertainty, fear, hence our highlighting this as a success. At the end of the day, only 451 persons who registered were not captured in our BVR, or the Provisional Voters Register. These 451 persons were not left out of the process, as they were clearly identified by names, and therefore arrangements were made for them to vote at the polling stations where they registered, and they were manually verified to do so. It is important to note that during the exhibition, the Commission had successful collaboration with CSOs and community leaders in the bordering communities, which led to the identification of foreigners and minors who were challenged and expunged from the register. It is interesting to note once again, ladies and gentlemen, that the 2024 Provisional Voters Register had several problems, which included persons whose image had to be placed by flowers, displacement of voters to centers other than where they registered. All voters at some centers were tagged face only, swap pictures of voters, and things like that. But today, the 2020 Voters Register had no such issues. And everybody whose name is in the register is a unique individual, thanks to the calculated effort to collaborate closely with the CSOs and community leaders in the border towns or communities, but more importantly, to the EBIS technology, which helped to easily identify and flag multiple registration. I want to focus our attention to the use of technology in our process. Apart from the physical or in the in-person exhibition that we did, the Commission also deployed the use of SMS short codes, remember 1422, and Google Play to enable voters check their details in the comfort of their homes. Unlike the SMS short codes that function for a specific period, the Google Play operated up to the election, thus allowing voters to check their details till the election day. Again, another innovation was the publication of the main voters register, special voters register, multiple exception and missing names list on the website of the Commission to improve transparency and minimize suspicion. The EC once again deployed stringent COVID-19 protocols at all the 33,367 exhibition centers to ensure adherence to these protocols. The EC deployed the services of over 33,000 assistants dubbed COVID-19 ambassadors to administer and ensure these and enforce these protocols. In a nutshell, the exhibition was successful because it ensured that no one person who registered was left out on the election day. It also strengthened the integrity of the register by ensuring that names of minors and foreigners were expunged from the register. Let me touch briefly on nomination. The nomination process was characterized by many successful innovations. Firstly, there was a timetable which was prepared with agreement of various candidates and their agents, which was largely adhered to, of course, with the exception of one party who failed to meet the requirement. To adhere to the time. Virtually all of them were able to adhere to the time. So that strategy worked perfectly. We also increased the number of receipt of nominations from 2 as pertained in 2016 to 5 days. In effect, it allowed aspirants enough time to submit and make corrections when necessary. This eliminated the suspicion, confusion, the acrimony, the tensions that characterized previous nomination processes. For the first time again, nomination forms and its related guidelines were published online, and unique password issued to specific individuals identified by the candidates or the party in contest. The net effect was that confusion over picking nomination forms by 2 candidates from the same party, as happened in 2016 and 2012, was eliminated. 5 more. Okay. Right, thank you. In 2020, for the first time, all the commission members, there was setup of 2 committees. We had the technical and the IT committee, and for the first time, a well thought out detailed report specifying reasons for qualification or otherwise were shared with the public at a press conference. And it is revealing to also note that this time round, all the commission members were available to receive the nomination forms and interact with candidates as and when they submitted it. On the election proper, permit me to say that the 2020 election had been hailed globally as meeting international standards. Indeed, the BBC was on record to have stated that elections in Ghana were boring because it was peaceful, well-coordinated, efficient, and seamless exercise. Overall, there was early start of the polls at some 8 and 9 of the polling stations visited by our monitors. By midday, most centers had no queues. This was accounted for by the speed and robustness of the verification device. Indeed, it took 2 to 5 minutes turnaround time to register a voter, unlike in the past, where there were long queues and frequent breakdowns of equipment and slowdown processes spanning some 10 to 15 minutes per voter. The resultant effect was that there were no queues and there were no absence of frustration, and there was absence of frustration, impatience, which often led to disagreement and conflicts breaking out at the polling stations in the past. In essence, there were serene and peaceful atmosphere at a majority of the polling stations throughout the country. In spite of the pocket of violence resulting in some unfortunate deaths in some 3 to 4 locations, there were no widespread violence as in the past where elections were characterized by ballot snatching, vandalism, assault, and intimidation. In effect, our PVDs work effectively. And here again, all these happened in the COVID environments where there were a lot of fear and anxiety. The declaration of the results by the EC was done in 48 hours. This, in essence, was to maintain peace and security. Indeed, the Commission initially planned to declare the result 24 hours, but due to some challenges, such as rainfall, which halted a poll at certain places, we were not able to do so. The Commission put in place strategies to achieve this objective, but due to the challenges mentioned, we were not able to do so. But at least we were able to do it in 28 hours. 48 hours. Now, finally, before I really close the curtains, I want to talk about other achievements, and I will focus on the cost of the election. The Commission succeeded in reducing the cost of the election per person by near 100%. In 2012, cost per person was $3 per person. In 2020, the cost per person was $7.7. $7.7 per person, as against $13 per person. Per person, yes, per head. This was enabled by the procurement method employed, which saw 95% of our procurement being done in an open, competitive tendering process, with the exception of the printing of the ballot papers, which had security implications, and the production of TV and radio adverts. All other procurements were done openly through the newspapers. It is important to emphasize that the COVID-19 pandemic hiked the cost of the elections in that we purchased face masks for some 240,000 staff and also bought other PPEs. Again, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, most of our offshore items, which had to be transported by air, unlike 2012 and 2016, when these items came by sea. This further hiked the cost. Unlike 2020, 2012 and 2016, when the Commission had tax exempts. In 2020, the Commission paid full tax for all its offshore items. These notwithstanding, we managed to reduce the cost of election per head by almost half the amounts in 2016. It is important to emphasize that materials procured for the replacement of the voters register was for an estimated 80 million persons. In 2026, however, the preparation was made for 3 million persons. Again, in 2020, the Right, thank you. Well, okay, and during the registration, we hired no less than 44,000 persons. In exhibition, we hired over 71,000 exhibition officers. And election itself, we hired over 231,000 election officials. In addition, between 2016 and 2020, we increased the number of polling stations by 10,000. This means that the commission hired 146,122 more staff working on an exhibition and election day alone. And yet, we managed to reduce the cost per person by almost half, as already indicated.
That's Michael Boyd, who is Director of Training at the Electoral Commission, giving their own account and assessment of election 2020. Earlier, we heard from Dr. Ibn Chambers, who is the keynote speaker at this stakeholders forum to discuss the election 2020. We'll take you back there after these messages.